Greetings to my fellow piece blunderers, and today I want to talk about one piece in particular, the one that is not really a fan favorite, the one that always has to suffer being compared to its more flashy, chaotic counterpart. Yes, today we're talking about the bishop. I'd like to discuss the main problem with the bishop, and I'd like to show you some positions as well where bishops are going to be quite useless. Hence, we're also going to try and learn how to avoid these positions. Now, some of you may expect me to say something like, well, bishops suck in closed positions. Case closed. Pun unintended, by the way. And yeah, it is 100% true. Bishops do tend to struggle in positions that are a little bit blocked and they've got lots of pawns in them, and bishops can't really show their long range prowess. However, I do not consider it to be the main problem with the bishops, because it is usually quite easy to predict that bishops are going to struggle when you got position closing down a little bit and you think to yourself, well, knights are going to be probably better, let me exchange a bishop for a knight, at least one of them, right? And because it is relatively easy to predict and it's relatively easy to get rid of at least one bishop, I don't think it's the biggest problem. No, I want to dig a little bit deeper. I want to look into some of the positions that actually look quite open but are still not that great for us. The main problem with the bishops has actually a lot to do with what Karpov once said about them, and you would expect them to come up with decent stuff, at least with regards to chess. Politics we don't talk about. And he compared bishops to billiard balls. Yes, billiard balls. And if this comparison isn't yet clear to you, this is fine. This is okay, because let's face it, it's not the most self-explanatory one. To explain it, let me actually clear the board and let me put a bishop somewhere on c1. Right there. That's all we need. Actually, not c1. Sorry, let me put it on c3. We just need the bishop. And on c3, the bishop is staring over some of the very interesting squares on black's king side, right? If we had the black pieces there, of course. And this is nice and all, but imagine if we needed to transfer the bishop to affect things on the opposite flank, on the queen side. So we want the bishop to stare at some squares over there. The problem with that is that, okay, we can maybe place it on e5, which seems like a decent square, but usually the e5 square isn't controlled by us when our opponent is playing sturdy. Usually the pawns are controlling the square or some other pieces, so that is rarely an option. So what are we supposed to do to make the bishop look at these squares? We are supposed to move the bishop like a billiard ball bounces off the cushion of a billiard table. We will most likely have to make this maneuver of bishop b1 bouncing off the cushion to g3. And yeah, from g3, bang, good. We are relevant to the queen side, hooray. And this is nice and all, but let's face it, sometimes we just don't have these two luxury moves. Sometimes we have more pressing matters to attend to, and this can actually come very costly. And that is, supposing that this path is even available from c3 to e1 and then to g3. If not, then it may take us even more moves, and this is even more costly. And bishops are known to be the more mobile pieces compared to knights, right? But yes, the bishop can, in one move, go from a1 to h8, which is brilliant sometimes. But what good is it, this bishop on a1, if all the play is happening, let's say, somewhere around here? And to transfer this bishop to affect that part of the board, you may have to do a 3-move maneuver, something like a1 to c3, and then to e1, and then to g3. So like this. 3 moves. And that is, again, even if that path is available. So, next time, when you fianchetto your bishops to like b2 and g2 and g7 and b7, you better make it work. You better make the bishops bloody work, because if the bishop is staring at nothing the whole game, then you may have a problem on your hands. And yeah, this is essentially the billiard ball problem. Bishops are sometimes having to literally bounce off the edges of the board to make themselves relevant to the position. This is the wrong arrow for the bishop, this is the correct one. And to show you some real life examples, let's start with position number 1. No, not this one, this one. This is a high level game, and all of the games that I'm about to show you are level games. This is Magnus Carlsen playing as white, your favorite grandmaster, against Etienne Bacrot. They played way back in 2010 when Carlsen wasn't yet world champion, so he was still very young but very strong, obviously. And we're starting with the Scotch game. We've got e4, e5. The first opening moves are self-explanatory if you're at least familiar with the Scotch. And after bishop c5, attacking that knight, that white has got some options, and Carlsen decided to go arguably for the best one. Maybe not the most popular one, but the engine says it's at least as good as the most popular one, which is not the subject of this video. Now we're looking at knight to b3. Attacking that bishop on c5, and the bishop lands on b6, and this is a completely fine position for both sides, nothing wrong with it. However, we are arriving at the position where this bishop has the typical billiard ball syndrome, and this is quite a strong variation of that syndrome, because this bishop landed on b6 and doesn't have much other squares to retreat to, like c7 is still there, a7 is still there. The bishop is bound to only stare at this part of the board, which is okay if you can make it work. If the game dictates that the play is going to be happening somewhere around here, and spoiler alert, Magnus Carlsen will start playing there, this bishop is absolute trash. It does next to nothing. Okay, it may slightly affect things on the d4 square, which is the closest to black's king side, but So Magnus, like I said, decides to exploit that almost immediately. So knight c3, knight f6 developing, and now queen e2. You would expect the bishop to come out and not the queen to come out to block the bishop. That signals us that Carlsen is probably castling queenside and wants to make use of that bishop being slightly iffy. Just push the pawns or the pieces forward and run black over. And it all kind of starts with castles and bishop g5 pinning that knight, already underlining how misplaced that b6 bishop can be. Usually you want this bishop to be somewhere like e7 to block that pin, but this pin is there to stay. It's not very easy to get rid of it, to be frank. h6, we just go back, and this is all completely fine. Now Bacrot wants to play a5, which is a sensible move. He foresees probably by now that Carlsen wants to castle queenside, so he already preemptively starts pushing forward the a-pawn, and maybe wants to put pressure on some of these knights, but Carlsen stops that with a4, very nice move. Now, knight d4 is a very interesting attempt, and this is a crucial point, right? What Carlsen may do is just take the knight, bishop takes, and Bacrot here is very happy, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. The bishop from d4 can start affecting the kingside, and basically the billiard ball maneuver is half complete by that point. I know it's not technically bouncing off the cushion, but still. And Carlsen is like, nah, I'm not going to allow you that. Like, you may as well take this knight and ruin my pawn structure a little bit. I don't care. Queen d3. I don't care. I am just going to, run you over anyway. So you can take this. Rook e8, castles. Let's have a game. Now, of course, you may play bishop c5, bishop f8 to sort of transfer to the kingside where things are about to get spicy. But the engine says it's too slow. It's hardly playable. So like bishop c5, the engine suggests just f4. And this is going to be just running over black very soon. This is just not good enough. However, bishop c5 wasn't played, and it's a good thing that it wasn't played because it's not a good move. Honestly, d6 is a much better attempt to try and maybe open up this bishop, which is actually helpful, and trying to solidify a little bit. However, in the absence of a dark squared bishop, and don't forget about the spin that is still absolutely devastating, Carlsen in the next 10 moves or so managed to make this position very, very, very difficult for black to play, open up the center a little bit, force the queen on the back rank, ruined the kingside pawn structure, and look at this bishop, completely useless, never moved, never did anything. Rook goes back to e2 because the rook was just attacked by the pawn, and we're not going to go any farther. This position is almost winning for white. It's like +1 and counting, and Carlsen did manage to win, but the point remains the same. This is just no good. And don't forget that this opening is a completely fine opening, and there is nothing wrong with it. In this position, white is just ever so slightly better, if better. But at the end of the day, Carlsen managed to capitalize on this bishop being on b6, recognized some interesting ideas, and applied them. Another position that highlights the billiard ball problem is this one. We've got the white pieces probably looking to play on the queen side. We've got the knights, looking at some of the juicy squares on the queen side. We've got this bishop also looking over there. We've got this rook ready to help the pawn push to a4. Basically, we've got a lot of things settled. And before we start that, the best move that the angel suggests, and a very clever move, the move that exploits that problem that we're discussing, is h4. Funny, right? So we're looking to play on the queen side, yet we're making a move on the opposite side of the board, yet it makes total sense. It attacks this bishop, right? And it practically forces the bishop on the awkward h6 square, because if you don't go to h6, where are you supposed to go? Here, not that great. I mean, knight can always take if it so wishes. I mean, there, it's completely nonsensical. There, knight takes again, and it's not that great. So bishop to h6 is the lesser of all evils. However, I don't need to explain to you that from h6, the bishop will have very little say on anything that is going to happen here. More than that, the bishop will have an extremely hard time to even get close to that part of the board. It's completely stuck, and the best it can probably do is look over that c1 square, maybe stopping a rook from getting there, maybe. But this is just not good enough, is it? Just in the next couple of moves, white proves that this bishop is just completely nonsensical, and like I advertised, opens up the position with a4. Remember that it is very often a good idea when you've got your opponent's pawns on a6 and b5 to strike with a4. It's a very good undermining move, and a move that you should be playing more and more often in your arsenal. You should definitely include. Takes, not even rushing to take this pawn back, develops the knight. This pawn is beyond salvation anyway. Now castles, because why not? Let's put the king to safety at least. Queen takes, black tries to at least remove one piece out of the equation on the queen side. Knight takes, knight takes, but this position is just better objectively for white, and we can see that this pawn is under tremendous pressure, and if this pawn were to go and these pawns were to move, it looks like a passed pawn and a strong one at that is about to get created, and this rook doesn't even have to go to c1. Can try and support maybe the b pawn at some point, and this bishop is just awful. It does absolutely nothing. Unless black manages to muster some attack on the king side, but it is not looking very likely as it stands. Another point for the white pieces there, because this bishop no good. And of course, the billiard ball problem is not exclusive to middle games. In the end games, this can be very, very costly as well. In this position, well, this bishop is just staring at nothing. Like all of these squares, maybe d6 is somewhat relevant a little bit, maybe stop the rook, but the rook doesn't want to go there, most likely. So this bishop is doing nothing. More than that, these pawns are doing an excellent job of stopping the bishop from redirecting itself to affect the queen side right there. Hence, basically a dead piece. It does absolutely nothing, and white pieces are going to pay for that very, very soon. In fact, a very interesting move that black plays here is a rook a to a3. See that knight attacks the rook, but black literally doesn't care. See that? And that is because after knight takes, pawn takes, this pawn is tremendously powerful. This pawn is tremendously powerful. The rook is attacked. The rook goes back to c1 or to d2. d2, I said. And either way, white is just screwed. Okay, c1. And even with 2 pieces left, the bishop and the rook, black will be able to push forward because, yes, white has got 3 pieces, even 4 if you count the king, which can, in some positions, help defend, but no, this is just not good enough. The pawn is very close to promotion, and on top of that, we've got the right colored bishop. We've got the bishop that is identical to the color of the queen in square right there. This bishop is just awful, and it's just terrible position for white. If you switch on the engine, it's going to show you some ridiculous numbers. And again, another technically open position that we've seen today, just as with previous two, those were not closed by any means, but this piece is still awful. It's absolute dog shit. And the knight on e1 has much more effect on the position of bishop on g3. It just, yeah, sometimes these things, they push you a little bit closer to quitting chess. So basically, to nullify this problem as much as possible, when you make really committal bishop moves, such as, well, this move is an opening move, so it can't really be avoided. Bishop b6 is theory, but when you make these moves, make sure that these moves in the long term are not going to be to your detriment. I know it's very difficult, it's very easy to say, very difficult to do, but still, if you see that you've got this bishop, don't let your opponent like pin you on the king side and push you on the king side. Try to foresee that and try to stop that. Just remember that bishops are very deceptively mobile. Yes, they can travel long distances in a finger snap, but it doesn't mean they can literally jump from one side of the board to another in one move, which just doesn't happen. The queen can do that because it can travel horizontally. The rook can do that. Even the knight can do that to an extent. But the bishop, yeah, not really. And yeah, if you just so happened to find this video useful, please like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments below if you had similar positions where your bishops are supposed to be good, but they turn out to be quite terrible. And follow me on Twitch. I stream Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. I stream on YouTube as well, so feel free to join anytime I do stream. Find me on chess.com, join our Discord, all that good stuff. And I'm going to talk to you very soon, my favorite unintentional gambiters. Love you all. See ya in the next one.